Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to this week's weekly recap, where we actually have quite a lot to talk about in pretty much all of the sports, but mostly the Batcats. We are going to lead with the Batcats because it's Batcat season. But, of course, we are going to talk about both of the Catsketball teams, though one of which we will be talking about very, very briefly. But before we get into any of that, we do want to thank Grandma because we always thank Grandma. So
thank you, Grandma.
But we can dive straight into the Batcats because they had a series this weekend where, I mean, they had one close game up against a William and Mary squad who's not very good, and they ruled them twice, 17-5, and then 20-6 in the last two games. So this is one of those where I feel like we can just go over notable performances, A, because it happened last weekend, and B, they got blasted. So the most obvious one for the weekend, before we even start about individual stat lines, is Max Martin, because, oh my.
Yeah, Maximus Martin had probably one of the best weeks, not just in the country that week, but probably one of the better weeks that the K-State baseball players ever had statistically. I mean, he was just a man on a mission this week, and I believe his combined stats, I'm pretty sure he did something like 8 for 12 with 5 home runs.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other absurd statistics that went with it. He had like 8 RBIs, I think, in the second game of the series, and he was the obviously he was Big 12 Player of the Week, but he was Golden Spikes National Player of the Week as well. Got a few other national honors as well. So he had one of the best weeks that a K-State player has had in a very, very long time. So he deserves a shout out all on his own.
Yeah. And we'll just go through game by game, just notable performances, because we got stuff to do. We got other stuff to talk about, including a hefty segment about women's basketball towards the end, because, oh boy. But in terms of notable offensive performances in the first game, of course, you had Max Martin, who hit a home run. Then Kyan Lotus ends up going 2 for 2 with a run and a walk, and playing for someone who's basically been a first baseman and corner outfielder for the majority of his career. He's actually played a pretty solid center field, which I didn't have on my bingo card, but it is worth mentioning. I just straight up did not expect that. But D. Kennedy went 1 for 4 with 2 RBI. And then that's pretty much it for the most notable performances outside of Sam Flores also getting an RBI. But the pitching performance was also pretty solid for everyone that came out for K-State. So you can get that in any other names I missed offensively.
Yeah, I won't list any other names on offense. I think that you really got the important ones, or the most important ones. But pitching, K-State threw 3 arms in this one. Jacob Frost got the start. He went 4 innings and gave up 3 hits, just 2 earned runs, and then 5 strikeouts, 2 walks. It did hit a batter, 71 pitches, so not the most efficient outing for Jacob Frost that you'll ever see, especially with just 4 innings pitched, but not a bad outing, of all things considered. Tyrell came in and pitched one of his best outings of the season. 2 2/3, just 1 hit, 1 walk, and a strikeout. Forced 5 groundouts in those 2 2/3, and it just took him 30 pitches to get through that as well. So really, really good stuff from Tyrell as well, who throughout his K-State career has been very inconsistent, but certainly a good outing here. Then Blake Dean came in. He's credited with the save in this one. He no hits allowed, no runs allowed, 3 strikeouts, 2 walks, did hit a batter. I did that in 2 1/3 and took him 42 pitches. So a solid closeout to the day for Blake Dean. But yeah, this was a pretty decent pitching day. I mean, any day you're holding really anyone to just 2 runs, you can say that you probably had a solid day pitching and in the field. Good day for the Batcats.
Yep. And the only big problem I had was the 3 errors, but they ended up just not really mattering all that much in this game. But the next game was an even more dominant performance by K-State. Ends up run ruling William and Mary 17-5. And there's not really much you can say for just how dominant this performance was. So, Connor, you get the unenviable task of naming the notable offensive performers.
Yeah. So we'll start with the obvious one here, Maximus Martin again. 2 for 4, 8 RBIs in this one, and drew a walk as well, and then had a strikeout. He started the scoring for K-State with a grand slam in the first inning as the cleanup guy. And then in the second inning, drove a 3-run homer as well. So there was a point in time there after the second inning where he was kind of on home run cycle watch since he got the most difficult one in the grand slam. But then he also had an RBI walk at that point, or RWI. But Maximus Martin was phenomenal. Had some solid defensive plays as well at short. So he was impressive. Outside of Maximus Martin, though, AJ Vasco, the true freshman, he went 3 for 5, and he had 4 RBIs himself. He had a single, a 1-run single on the 5th, and then had a 3-run home run on the 7th inning. That ended up being the walk-off to force the run rule. So a really good day for AJ Vasco, who has, even though he's a true freshman, he has pretty much forced himself into the lineup. I mean, there's just no way that we can keep him out consistently. Ty Smolinski, another true freshman from Nebraska, he had himself a great game as well. His first career hit was in the second inning of this game, and it was a home run to deep center. So that'll be one that he'll always remember. And he got the start at the hot corner as well. He went 2 for 3, 2 RBIs, and drew a walk as well. So really, really solid home debut for Ty Smolinski, who we haven't seen as much of early in the season as we've seen of AJ Vasco. But he's another person to keep an eye on as the season continues. But otherwise, notable performances, Bear Madliak, he went 2 for 3 with an RBI as well. He had a home run to go with the 2 from Martin, and the 1 each from Vasco and Smolinski. So that rounds out the 5 on the day for K-State. Otherwise, a lot of guys having solid days. Seth Dardar scored 3 runs, even though he was 1 for 4. Kyan Lotus had 3 runs as well on a 1 for 3 day. And then Nick English drew 3 walks in this one and scored 3 runs. So Nick English ends his day 0 for 1 with 3 runs, which jumps off the page a little bit. But
yeah, it's just a weird stat.
Yeah, a lot of notable guys from Bats in this one.
Yeah. But pitchers, there were only 2. It was Michael Cavedo, who ended up going 3 2/3, 6 hits, 4 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. I believe all 4 of those runs came on a nope, I was incorrect. For some reason, I thought it was on a grand slam. I was thinking of it. I've been mistaken. But he still had no walks, 4 strikeouts, did hit 2 people, but only got 66 pitches in. And then Dante Lewis entered the game, 3 1/3 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 5 strikeouts, 48 total pitches. So I know it's a run rule, but still getting through an entire game in 114 pitches is kind of crazy. Like, that was just not 2 years ago. That was just Owen Borama that he was just doing that. But the ascension of Dante Lewis is still remarkable to me. I'm curious where they will, if they're going to keep him as pitcher DH or if they're going to give him a position in the field. Part of me wants him to be like pitcher shortstop or pitcher center fielder just so he can double up on premium positions because that's hilarious. And I think he could do it. But
Yeah, and I think he's played a little bit in the field this year as well. I just can't remember exactly where. I think it might have been in the outfield. But I mean, I seem to remember Dante Lewis kind of being seen as like the ultimate utility guy, as in like he can play just about any spot except maybe catcher. And I mean, granted, there'd be a few places where he might be wasted, like at first or right. But honestly, yeah, he's someone I could see playing middle infielder, third, or center, and then just coming into pitch at some point. But I guess I've been mainly surprised in the fact that he's gotten so much run as a pitcher. I was really thinking that we might see him more as a pinch hitter in this early part of the season, but his stuff is just so good as a pitcher. You just can't keep him off the mound.
Yeah. And Dante Lewis is still probably the most exciting player on this team. And that's saying a lot given Maximus Martin is also on this team. Which, speaking of Max Martin, yes, he had a good game the next game as well. 20-6 run rule victory against William and Mary. Yeah, we'll just go ahead. Max Martin went 5 for 5 with two dingers, 2 no doubters as well. I think that's the part that's funniest to me is like they were just absolute dongs. There's nothing really else to say there. Max Martin had himself a weekend. Outside of that, you did have a few other notable performances. This was a total of 6 home runs. KOC, Keegan O'Connor, ends up hitting 2 of his own in a 3-for-4 day with 3 RBI and 3 runs. And the other 2 home runs were Shintaro Inoue and Caden Phillips. But even looking outside of just home runs, D. Kennedy went 2 for 5 with 2 RBI. Bear Madliak 2 for 4 with 1 RBI. KOC got him, like I said earlier, it's a 3-for-4 day. Shintaro Inoue 2 for 4. Caden Phillips 1 for 3. So again, you're putting up 20 runs. You donkey roll the other team. There's absolutely nothing else to say.
Yeah, the best part of this game was that a ton of guys were able to play in this one. You pretty much emptied the bench, all things considered, with the exception of I was hoping to see Dante Lewis, but I understand not wanting to overstress him, particularly after he had thrown like a 40-pitch outing the day before, and we didn't really need him either. But we were getting some of the reserves in, like Rowan Putz, like Sam Flores and Caden Carl. David Bishop, who we haven't seen as much of this year due to the ascendance of Seth Dardar as a adequate defensive option, but a much better offensive option at first base. But it's also a good problem to have where for the first time in quite a while for K-State, it seems like we're rotating a lot of guys, not out of necessity, but because we're struggling to find enough ABs for everybody, because there's a lot of good hitters on this team.
Yeah, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. Because, like, first off, I wouldn't have projected David Bishop to be one of those guys that was sort of getting pressed into being a platoon / defensive sub guy. But I do very much like what Pete Hughes is doing in terms of like managerial, where Caden Carl is getting in pretty consistently as a defensive sub in center field. So you get your more offensive minded, maybe a little bit stronger arm center fielder in the starting lineup. Your Micah Deans, your AJ Avasca. It's mostly Micah Dean and Kyan Lotus starting in center. But you still get that defensive prowess, because if there's one thing that Caden Carl has shown, it's that he's fast and has a really good glove. So it could be one of those things where he has the Brendan Jones arc where he's always super fast and always pretty consistent with the glove, but he just needs to work a little bit more on getting the offensive consistency. But it's a tough it's a tough position to be in when you have so many mouths to feed. But you have the pitching staff as well. As any comments that you want to make about the depth on this team?
Yeah. The interesting thing, I guess, to really say about pitching in this game was that this actually, for the first couple of innings, was a bit of a back and forth affair. William and Mary actually took the lead in the top of the first. They retook it in the top of the second. Then they closed the gap to 8-5 in the fifth inning. But that was really it for their effort. The K-State just exploded in the bottom of the fifth for 9 runs. But the pitching staff, probably the roughest start of the year for Lincoln Sheffield, who has, for the most part this year, been a bit of a revelation. He, I think, has exceeded just about everybody's expectations. But this wasn't his best day. 4 1/3, 8 hits, 5 runs, 4 of them earned, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, 69 pitches. So not the best day. He did force 7 ground outs, just 2 flyouts. The problem is when the ball was getting in the air, it was going a long way with Lincoln in this game. So a bit of a disappointing start. Maybe this is just kind of a breaking and Toynton game for him, where he's just going to have to get used to the fact that if the wind is blowing from the west, keep the ball low. Do not let the ball get in the air because the well hit baseballs this weekend were definitely catching the gusts and they were making their way out pretty quick. But other than Lincoln Sheffield, we saw Miles Smith, who we haven't seen much of this year. He pitched an inning and had a very busy stat line for 1 inning. 1 hit, 1 earned run, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts with a hit batter in there as well, and 34 pitches. So that's a lot more than you want to see on a stat line for just a single inning of work. But particularly interesting, I think, is that all 3 of the outs he got were strikeouts, despite everything else. So he's still generating some misses in there, but just a really strange stat line, I thought it was worth mentioning. Taz Butler, he came in and pitched 2/3 of an inning, and it only took him 4 pitches to get out of it. I think he forced a double play. Yeah, he only faced 1 batter. So talk about efficiency and get through 2/3 of an inning and 4 pitches. It doesn't get much more efficient than that.
No.
And JJ Slack came in and closed it out, gave up 1 hit, got a strikeout, 21 pitches to seal the deal for K-State in that 7th inning. But yeah, saw 4 pitches in this one, a little bit more of a staff day, not the best day for Lincoln Sheffield. But I mean, when you're winning 20-6 and you have the offensive cushion you do, that's the time to put someone out there like Miles Smith, who clearly has some good stuff as he's getting 3 strikeouts in an inning of work. But maybe just need some live practice a little bit more.
Yeah. So that was the William and Mary series, but K-State did play 2 other games, and neither of them went their way. At least the one up against Crichton. Well, no, there's no really there's not a lot positive to take from either of these games, except for the general takeaway being, yeah, that's baseball. Sometimes you just drop games that you shouldn't because baseball is a temperamental game. But the first one up against Crichton, K-State ends up dropping the game on a score of 9-8. And I hate to pin it on one player, especially someone who's been, very emaw in his time, but this was a blow-up start. That's kind of the best way to say it for JJ Slack. He didn't have it today, and there are some days that you don't have it. He knows that. So I don't want to dwell on it, but yeah, 7 earned runs with 5 walks. That's not gonna play. Like, that's just not it's very hard to overcome that when that's happening in less than 2 innings.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, digging yourself a 7-2 hole through 2 innings, that's difficult to get out of, no matter who you're facing. And Case just about did, but Creighton got 2 insurance runs in the 6th, and they needed every single bit of that insurance, with K-State dropping this game by just 1. And having some chances to retake the lead, but just couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah, but you have the offensive guys here.
Yeah, K-State, the leadoff guy was Shincharo Inoue in this game. He went 2 for 5, but did have 3 strikeouts. D. Kennedy went 2 for 3 and drew a couple of walks, so very efficient day for him. AJ Avasco in his first game in his home state did just go 1 for 4, but did score 2 runs and had a grand slam in the 5th inning to bring K-State within 1. So that was a huge momentum swing, but unfortunately, Creighton in the very next inning turned around and re-extended that lead, getting to 9 runs. But other than that, not a ton of super notable statistics from the offense. Keegan O'Connor had an RBI, went 1 for 3 and got hit by a pitch. Kyan Lotus went 1 for 2 and drew a walk. But Nick English drew a couple of walks himself, and went 0 for 2. But yeah, this was not a bad day for the bats, all things considered. 11 strikeouts is way too high, but drawing 6 walks and getting 8 hits out of it is still solid. But the problem was absolutely the pitching in this game. I think it's pretty obvious. No reason to really kind of hide the ball on that one.
Yeah. And the bad news is that it really was just the one blow-up start, because everyone else had a pretty solid day. Ty Rule going 1 1/3, only giving up 1 hit to 1 walk with 2 strikeouts and a hit by pitch. 26 pitches. Brody Rowe had an inning pitch, 1 hit, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Taz Butler went an inning, give up 2 hits to 2 runs, got deuces, 2 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, 33 pitches. Then Blake Dean came in for the final 3 innings. He's been great this year. 2 hits, 2 walks, 4 total strikeouts. So really it is just that 7 spot that Crichton put up in the 2nd inning that K-State just can't really overcome. I mean, you can point to the 2 insurance runs in the 6th inning, but K-State got those back. They ended up getting those insurance runs right back the very next inning. So it just ends up being an unlucky draw, which, happens with baseball. And that's kind of how I described the next game as well, although the next game is infinitely more disappointing because Crichton was 8-4, I believe, going into the game up against K-State. This is a bad Omaha team. And I think this is probably worse than the Omaha team that K-State lost to a few years ago. And that team, I think, won maybe 10 games.
Yeah, this was a horrid loss. By far the worst on the year for the Batcats.
And K-State ends up dropping 3-1. And their lone run was in the top of the 9th inning when the game basically fell all but over. And it was just a really bad day for the Bats to go cold. Only 4 hits. The only multi-hit day was Keegan O'Connor, who also brought in the lone run, which 3 of the 4 hits were extra base hits. And we just couldn't bring them home from scoring position. So it sucks. It happens, but this is definitely one of those games. It's sort of the inverse of the previous game where that game you put it on a blow-up start. This one, the Bats went cold at a very inconvenient time.
Yeah, that is one way to put it. The K-State going 4 for 31 as a team. That is not a winning formula against anybody, even if they're not a very good team like Omaha. And just 2 walks to 7 strikeouts. Just a brutal day at the plate for the Batcats against a team that they absolutely should have beat. It really does kind of take the wind out of your sails a little bit, I think, as a fan, with how great of baseball they have been playing. It feels like, just after all of the work they've done the last 2 weeks to still be at just barely above 500, despite, I know, playing tough competition, other than these 2 games in Nebraska, of course. But, man, it sucks to be where they're at.
Yeah. And you you can talk about the lone bright spot, which was the pitching today.
Yeah, K-State threw a lot of guys in this game. We saw 6 arms this one. Tanner Duke, the transfer from Baylor, got the start. He went 4 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 3 strikeouts, hit a batter as well, 54 pitches. So an okay start for him. Mason Buss had a pretty rough day, only going a third of an inning, 2 hits, 1 earned run, 2 wild pitches, hit a batter. I mean, you really can't have much more of a disaster in just 12 pitches than what Mason Buss had. But he's someone that oddly has seemed to get worse over his college career, because he was a fairly solid relief option, even got some spot starts as a freshman. Saw less of him last year, and this year he has been kind of non-existent, honestly. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. We saw true freshman Micah Henson for a third of an inning. He came in and forced a ground out in 4 pitches and left to never be seen again. James Guyad pitched 1 1/3 innings, just couldn't find the zone, giving up an earned run, 3 walks, just 1 strikeout, 2 hit batters, a couple of flyouts, and a ground out for him. Then Adam Arthur came in, got 2 strikeouts in an inning, and Dante Lewis got 2 strikeouts and 1 hit in an inning as well. Notably, Omaha pitched 9 guys,
including a B. Weber.
Yes, which I think may be a Weber we had on our team at one point, because we had a Ben Weber. I don't know if this is the same Ben Weber. I meant to check, and I still have not gotten around to it. But I know at one point we had a Ben Weber on our team, and yeah, I think this might be the same. This might be the same guy.
Not the Ben Weber revenge game.
Yeah, which, granted, he did not do too much. He just pitched 1 inning. He was just an opener for them. But yeah, he was the he is the.
It is Ben Weber.
It's the same guy. So a Ben Weber revenge game. Just a sentence I never thought I would say in my life. But yeah, Omaha just, I think, went for a strategy of saying, we are a team that I think a lot of times does well. The more we see of a guy, the more used we can get to a pitcher. And they said, we're just going to throw 9 people, and you will never get used to them. And it worked.
Yeah, but that's pretty much it for this game. K-State does have their conference opener up against Utah this weekend. The day this comes out starts at 6 p.m. up against Utah, then 4 p.m. Saturday, 1 p.m. Sunday. So pretty standard time distribution for that. So go support the Batcats. And all right, we can briefly talk about the men's team. Their season is mercifully over. I feel like I said the exact same thing last season. However, I feel like this season is even more of a mercy. They did beat an Arizona State team with like 7 players in the first game, 71-66, then lose to Baylor 56-70. We'll do an autopsy on this season, just not now. I don't want to talk about them right now.
Yeah, this is a team that definitely limped to the finish line, unfortunately. We'll always have that 6-game run. That was a genuinely fun run of basketball, and we cannot take that from them. That does not mean that we're going to ignore the other 32 games, or other, I guess it'd be other 26 games or whatever. But I mainly feel for David Gasson. He deserved much better than how this season has ended for the level of effort and level of K-Stater he is. And this is going to go down as one of the most disappointing K-State basketball teams ever, for better or for worse. But like you said, there will at some point be a more thorough dissection of what happened with this team. And there's going to be some things we're just never going to know. But what are you going to do?
David Castillo announced he's coming back.
That's great, man.
Max Jones plans on coming back if he gets a D2 waiver.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing, I guess, is that there should be some players that come back that I'd be happy to see come back. Mainly David Castillo, because even though honestly he had a pretty bad year for a true freshman season, I'm curious to see if he can take a leap just because of the quality of recruit he was. Doug McDaniel seemed to kind of find something at points during the year.
Yeah, and Tang was talking like he expected Doug back.
Yeah, which would be good. I'd like Hassan back. I'd like Jones back. I'd like to have a good enough roster to where both those guys are like your 6th and 7th players. But I don't know if that's possible. So we'll see. We'll see on that. Hopefully, the recent commits, Xavier Wilson and Ashton McGee, are the next LeBron and Curry, and we can just rely on them. But I'll settle my expectations and say they'll be the next Keontae and Marquise. So
you're not setting yourself up for disappointment there, buddy.
Not at all. I think I'm being reasonable.
Yeah, that's it for the men's team. Now we can talk about the women's team. Everyone knows they won the first game up against UCF, end up dropping the second up against West Virginia. Yeah, every bracketology no longer has them hosting. And I don't want to say that they have no one to blame but themselves, but there is certainly someone who deserves a share of the blame. And that's because it's the same thing every year. Midi coach teams always fade towards the end of the season, despite a hot start and really being more immensely talented than pretty much anyone they share a core with. If you're even in that same tier as K-State talent-wise, you can, so long as you have somewhat decent coaching, you're fine. Or if you have a JJ Quinterly, because I know we talked about this last week, but seriously, how did Haley Van Lith win over JJ Quinterly? That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I remain bewildered by that. I get Haley Van Lith did have a great season. There's no doubt about that, but I think it was just a popularity contest. Because if it wasn't, then I think Quinterly or Crooks are winning that. It's a runaway between those two.
And Serena's probably in like a third place.
Yeah. I think Serena had a better season than Haley Van Lith did, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. So now K-State is going to be sweating on Selection Sunday, which is this Sunday. Most bracketologists have them going down to Oxford, Mississippi. So I was about to say no offense if you're from Mississippi, but I wouldn't send my worst enemy down to Mississippi. So now they've played themselves into going to hell, basically. So it's just really frustrating because this is a more talented team than last year's team, and I don't think it's particularly close. But they just played themselves out of a host position, probably because, like I said, every bracketologist now has them as a 5 seed, and it's just getting old at this point because it's the same story every year. But I'll let you get your thoughts out on that because there are other rumors circulating around the K-State women's basketball team now.
Yeah, man. I'm just wildly disappointed with how the season ended. I can't say I'm surprised because for whatever reason, the last several years for the Midi Cats, it has really been a limp to the finish line rather than a sprint through the finish line. I don't know why that is. It's gotten to a kind of concerning level, I think, particularly with how talented these teams have been for K-State. Like this year, I mean, finishing 1-3 against conference opponents, and then winning decently, but not as dominantly as you'd like against UCF, and then losing again to West Virginia after the start they had is really depressing. I know it's without Ayoka, but man, it still burns. And then you go back to last year. You look at finishing 1-2 in conference play, drop another game in the Big 12 tournament, and then of course losing on your home floor when you're hosting by double digits. Go back 2 years ago. K-State ended the year on a 3-game losing streak, won a game in the Big 12 tournament again, and then lost in the second round again, and then went on a little mini run through the WNIT. Take it back to 21-22 now. K-State lost 3 of their last 4, lost their first game in the Big 12 tournament, and then went 1-1 in the NCAA tournament because they got stuck on the 8-9 line because of how they finished. Got destroyed by NC State. 2020, 2021, you go back, K-State loses 3 of their last 4, their lone win over a bad TCU team in overtime, and then go 1-1 in the Big 12 tournament again and miss the postseason entirely.
It's a pattern.
Yes. Though you have to really go back to the season that got canceled by COVID at the very end to find a place where K-State actually finished kind of strong. K-State went 4-1 to end the year, their lone loss being against Baylor and Waco. And that was when they still had Kim Mulkey and they canceled the tournament. And then the year before, they had a 5-game win streak to end the year and then got demolished in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But the last 4 or 5 years, it's been 1-3, 1-2 finishes, split the Big 12 tournament, and then do nothing in the postseason, really. I don't know why this keeps happening, but we've heard this song before.
Yeah, and I think the part that is most concerning to me, and this will transition us very nicely into the rumors. There have been an increasing amount of rumors that Jeff Mittie, the head coach of the women's team, is entertaining overtures from the University of Missouri, which at first struck me as very odd because Mizzou women's basketball is god awful. They've been abysmal for years now. And Mittie's getting towards the back end of his career. He'd be entering a rebuild. So I kind of expected it to go away pretty quick. And originally it did. Because he said, yeah, I haven't talked to Mizzou. I'm not really interested. But then the rumors just didn't die. And they kept going on and on to this point where I think it's a coin flip whether or not he's back at K-State. That's just me personally. I don't have any insider information, but it's time to have a difficult conversation about Jeff Mittie. Because he has had 2 undisputed greatest of all time players at K-State with Ayoka Lee and Serena Sundell, a Hall of very good player in Jalen Glenn, who I'm very excited for the arguments from 3 people 4 years down the line that she is a Raptors player. I'm very excited for those arguments because Connor and I, you and I have had this discussion where neither of us think she is, but we do think that she's going to be one of those players that people seem to just gravitate towards.
Yeah. I don't think that there's any sound argument for her to get in the rafters. I really don't, but I
It's just
do.
vibes.
I really do think it's going to be like that because she's like the third musketeer when it comes to Serena Naokali, and she's been here for a while. She's beloved by the fans, and I love that too. But no, she's not a Raptors player. I think that's pretty plain.
Yeah.
Like I refuse to entertain an argument that she belongs in the
No.
Raptors. No offense.
No. But you get those three. You had Gabby Gregory last year. You had Tamira Poindexter this year. Sarah Shamazi was actually well thought of coming out of the transfer portal. It didn't end up that way, but and you've won nothing. Like you genuinely, there are no new trophies in the trophy case for K-State women. There is a WNIT We Made It banner. There are no Sweet 16 appearances, no Elite 8 appearances, no Final Four, no conference championships. And all of this wouldn't be so hard to swallow if you didn't have two of the best players that K-State has ever had on a women's basketball court in Serena Sandel and Ayokali. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a coach who can recruit, is probably pound for pound the best recruiter throughout all of K-State, outside of maybe Pete Hughes, but who just falters down the stretch and isn't the best at in-game coaching. Let's stick to that point before we talk about the number one name for who would replace Jeff Mittie.
Yeah, I don't know what to add to this because it's just, I mean, like we've really throughout the whole history of this show, we've kind of had a similar conversation about how we've ended seasons every single year, and how it's always like next year's the year, and we're now in the final the year, and it's looking like it's not going to be the year. Granted, there's still a chance that they end up on the 5 line and make a run to the second weekend, which would be nice. But I mean, the way that we've been playing and what history tells us is most likely, it's seeming unlikely that happens. And I still don't know if I necessarily want Jeff to leave because I don't really. I like Jeff Mittie. I think that he's a solid coach and a really good recruiter. But it's, man, I'm just so wildly disappointed, and I'm sure he is too. But like, man, like we're gonna have these incredible players that are gonna go up in the rafters in Serena and Ayokali, and they're not gonna really talk about any team accomplishments when they go up. Like they're not going to be like multi-time Big 12 champions or like made it to the Final Four, made it to the Elite 8. Like they're not going to be saying that stuff, or they're just going to be like they scored a lot of points and had a lot of rebounds and assists and steals and started the most games ever and were really good. And Yokely has like the points record in a single game, like which that's all incredible stuff, but ultimately are gonna be the type of player where if you're not like pretty dialed into K-State women's basketball, you're not going to remember them because of their achievements. I mean, like even the early 2000s teams that had Wecker and Oldie, I mean, they won the Big 12 one of those seasons, even though they never did anything in the NCAA tournament. They constantly got stomped in like the second round, but like they won the conference one time. We're just not going to be able to say that with these teams. Like you're not going to be able to look up and see their banners on the south end of Bramlage and then like look to other banners and like correlate the years that they were here with like an Elite 8 or a conference title or anything like that. There's going to be like a WNIT quarterfinals and some NCAA tournament first weekend exits, which completely blows because it totally undersells the value and the level of play that Serena and Ayokali brought to the table. I don't want to quite say wasted, because there were some incredible moments. Obviously, Aoka Lee will forever be remembered for her individual achievements, and Serena Sindel was part of some of the great upsets in K-State women's basketball history, the few wins over Iowa. But the team achievements, like the trophies, like you said, when the lights were brightest, it just burns, man. It really does.
Yeah, and this is where, to me, you raise the question of, say there's a hypothetical world where, and I'm sort of with you, where I don't want to, like, I'm not on the, oh, let's fire Jeff Mittie train. My stance is, if you're going to get into a bidding war for Jeff Mittie between K-State and Mizzou, I'm not entertaining the bidding war. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There is absolutely zero justification for firing him. Like, that would be, like, absurd. Like, yeah, he's certainly, like, not achieved the heights that we were hoping for these last 2 years. We were promised, like, some trophies, and it's looking like we're not going to get that. But that doesn't mean fire him, of course. But no, yeah, like, particularly with new media rights deals going in, SEC schools are going to have, SEC and Big Ten schools, they're going to have way more money than pretty much any other conference. And they're just going to be able to increase the coaching salaries bubble until it bursts. And that's going to pour over into non-revenue sports as well, like women's basketball. If a school decides they really want somebody, and they really they have a donor that's willing to step up and get them, they are going to have the media money available to kind of give them insurance on their purchase, and they can just make a better offer more often than not, with reckless abandon. So, like, that's probably just what's going to happen if he decides to take it, which kind of gets back to the original thing that you were talking about. Why would he even entertain this offer? That's something I still don't really know. He didn't go to Mizzou. He's not a Mizzou alum. Like, he's from Blue Springs, but that's
it's equidistant between Columbia and Manhattan.
Yeah, that doesn't really compute to me. Like, I don't really see the major connection there, unless he just has, I guess, a ton of family on his side that are like Mizzou fans or something, or if he grew up a Mizzou fan. But he's never been to Mizzou as a coach or as an athlete. He's scheduled them a few times the last couple years and demolished them, but that's about the only connection I'm really able to see.
Well, but other than, I think Mizzou's AD was on staff when Mittie was hired.
Yeah, their AD is, I think, Laird Veach, and he was the AD at Memphis, and before that, he was an associate AD here at K-State, and he was here for a while. I don't know what it is about former K-State athletic department people going on to be ADs at power conference schools, but that has been happening just a ridiculous amount as of late, because it's what now Mizzou, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. John Curry's at Wake Forest, and I think his associate AD was the AD at Cleveland State and was an associate here before. So I don't know. We are just athletic director I guess. I don't know what to make of that, but I digress. I don't really see the appeal for this job unless it is purely a financial endeavor, which in that case, I can totally see the appeal if that is the only thing that he's thinking about. But he's got a very good contract here at K-State. He's going to be making over $1 million by the time he retires, depending on how long he stays. And he's got it's clear that he hasn't lost the competitive fire, because he's bringing in the best recruiting class in K-State women's basketball history.
He's still screaming at people.
So like the fire isn't gone, at least from what we can tell. And it seems he's planning for the future here at K-State. So I don't know why he would leave. It's not a move that really makes sense to me without additional information, which makes me think there's probably something else going on that we don't know about, but I don't know what that would be. I just can't speculate.
Yeah.
Long and short of it, I hope he doesn't leave, but we should not entertain a bidding war with Mizzou because Mizzou will win. And it would either be Mizzou will win or we will be paying way more than we can afford.
Yeah. And let's say a hypothetical world exists where K-State does get in a bidding war. There is one candidate who is, basically been screaming that everyone has been screaming from the rafters that K-State should get, and that's the current Oklahoma State coach, J.C. Hoyt. I would say that that's probably the leader in the clubhouse for, if Mitty ends up leaving. And I threw out this comp to Connor and I think Drew Galloway on Twitter, where J.C. Hoyt might just end up being women's basketball Rob Vaughn, where longtime listeners of this show remember that Connor and I were perhaps the biggest Rob Vaughn truthers in existence. And then he went to Alabama, and Alabama is currently 17-1. So I understand the concerns about J.C. Hoyt. She did lose to some bad teams in Big 12 play, and most notably Houston. But she's also rebuilt two of the laughingstocks of college basketball in pretty rapid succession at UMKC and Oklahoma State. So, and she has a K-State connection. She's a Kansas kid. To me, that's like perhaps the most obvious hire in history. But it all depends on if Mitty ends up further entertaining the Mizzou overtures, which, again, at this point, I feel like it's a coin flip. And that's not even getting into the recruiting class, because my biggest concern with losing Jeff Mitty is not losing Jeff Mitty, the coach. It's losing Jeff Mitty, the recruiter. Losing Foy and Spicer would be one of the swiftest kick to the nads that we have had on this show. But, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that J.C. Hoyt, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think she was just the superior X's and O's basketball coach.
Yeah, that's probably true. My only lingering concern with J.C. Hoyt is I want to see her coach at this level. Success-wise, just a little bit more consistently before I call her a sure thing. Because UMKC, she was pretty good there. And Oklahoma State's been great this year, as we unfortunately know. But they were kind of a bottom feeder for a long time in the conference. And she has gotten things turned around pretty quickly there. And she's got some good players. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. I'd say I'm fairly sold on her, and I think she could be a good hire. I'm curious how good of a job K-State is seen as for women's basketball coaches, because I think it's clear that we're kind of throwing some NIL money around in that space. So I'm pretty curious of who would even be interested in the job, outside of Hoyt. But I think that she could be a solid hire if it comes to fruition, which it may not even. This may all just be nothing.
This may just be Saturday morning talking points, honestly. That's what it might be, but still, it's worth having a conversation.
Yeah, it may just be people filling a news void. But no, like you said, it's at least worth thinking about and worth considering. And it's something I'm sure the AD probably has in the back of their mind. I don't know how imminent anything is, but I certainly don't think he would take a job right before the NCAA tournament.
No.
That would definitely be one of the looks of all time if he did that.
That's how you make yourself into a supervillain with not only your players, but that's how you start getting punched out by players.
Yeah, so I doubt that's going to happen, but it's something to definitely keep our eyes on once the off season hits.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've yapped enough about at this point what is speculation. You have any final notes before we sign off?
No, nothing else.
All right. Well, if that's the case, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdward00.
I'm at Connor Balthazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.